Welcome to Reboot Cyber with Avertro, the Boardroom series.
Hi, Shamane. Very excited to have you on Reboot Cyber with Avertro. There's been a few things happening with you lately, hey?
Yeah, lots has been happening, so really hard to keep track of them now, but
Yeah,
very, very exciting times.
awesome. Yeah, let's go over your intro real quick. So Shamane is currently the Chief Growth Officer at Sekuro, leading the security outreach strategy with the C-suite and executives. She's also recognized by IFSEC as one of the global top 20 cybersecurity influencers, and more recently, one of the 30 top women in security for the ASEAN region in 2021. On top of that, Shamane is also the founder of Cyber Risk Meetup, an international community for cyber risk executives to exchange learnings. And if that's not enough, she's also an established author of 2 books now. One of them is Cyber Risk Leaders, which I actually have here, that actually features Avertro's own
Nice.
CEO and founder, Ian Yip.
Yes.
Um, Excellent. And yeah, for those of you who's listening to the podcast, I'm actually pointing to my copy of the book. And we'll definitely get back to in terms of your second book after this as well. I
Sounds
definitely want to hear more about it. All right. With all that in mind, let's start with the questions. So first of all, what's the latest? Tell us about Sekuro.
We are right now in our week 4 of our merger. So it was a really, really busy back then with Privasec because it has been one of our busiest year, working with different CISOs on their cyber resiliency maturity programs. And now merging with 3 other businesses, CXO, Solista, and Avertro, that just means that we're able to provide our customer a full end-to-end cybersecurity service. And not just previously like in assurance and compliance services or adversary attack simulations. Now we are able to do a lot of work in technology and platform engineering, cloud and tech implementation, and talent augmentation as well. So we are able to support the full suite across like people, process, and technology. And there has been a shift in the kind of conversations that I'm having with not just our CISOs but the CIOs as well. So it's been very exciting.
Awesome. Very exciting indeed, and definitely a company to watch. I've seen you guys in the news quite a bit in the last couple of weeks. All right, let's go on with some of the questions that we have. With all that in mind, what are the biggest issues you're witnessing with corporate organizations within cybersecurity, and what could be done about them?
Yeah, so that's definitely a really good question. I would say that maybe I would just want to highlight 3 key issues that we need to address. So the first is culture. There is a differing awareness across business divisions. The second thing is also that our CISOs are too stretched. And the third thing is that communications amongst the C-suite and the CISOs need to be taking place more. So addressing cyber risk is a really big job, and there's just not enough hours in a day for our CISOs. So having worked with many security professionals, I've seen a lot of them who have continued to actually work in silos, and they're engulfed by their own challenges, and they're not actually communicating across to different stakeholders. They're too stretched even to think about, how can they add value back to the ecosystem. And defending against cyber risk is not an individual story to tell, but that of an ecosystem. You have to work with your partners, alliances, and even leverage of cyber mentors from the industry. So leaders really need to realize that sharing of knowledge is important. They have to make time for it and schedule that in their calendars to build and influence relationship with their other C-executive stakeholders. And then actively also join soundboarding sessions or roundtables with their other CISO peers.
Yeah, very, very important points there. So secondly, from your point of view and experience, how can our cyber leaders and boards have effective communication strategies?
Yeah. So if we were to take a step back then, before a strategy exists, there needs to be a strong understanding of the business model, objectives, and also the business mission, right? So when you understand those things really well, then you will be able to design a cybersecurity strategy that is effective for the business. So effective execution requires a really good understanding of what and how the business perceive risk, and then being able to influence them to achieve a meaningful outcome. And that's what you want at the end of the day. So it involves knowing how to also overcome best practice apathy, because there's a lot of those. So I actually had Preston Millen, who was the former CISO at NASA JPL, on my show before, and he really emphasized on the importance of security professionals being in the office of know, KNOW, and not no, NO. Because security is not always about saying no or being a
Yep.
roadblock. As our communications need to really add value and offer knowledge that people can understand, right? So then it becomes effective. And the baseline of it is that you have to understand it. Too many CISOs are still struggling, and they're cramming many technical controls and talking about technical jargons in their strategy presentation, and this goes over the head of the other executives, right? So and then also there are those who are more comfortable with the qualitative sort of risk assessments, right? And the thing is that the reports to your CFO or your CRO needs to be in business speak, risk focused and quantitatively defensible with evidence. And execs at the end of the day just need to know 5 things. What data should we care about? Where is it stored? Who has access to it? How is it secured at the moment? And what our response should be if the data is compromised.
Yeah.
Oh, but unlike executives as well, who are just more focused on the operational aspects, I just want to highlight that it's important that we have to understand that there's a separate success criteria if you're speaking to the board, right? Because they're more focused on clients.
Yep. Okay. Excellent. I was actually in the session with Preston Miller a couple of months ago at one of the Clubhouse session, but I did also watch your show with him. That was very, very interesting.
He did share a lot of good insights.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, following on from the last question, actually, can you share some of those examples of the success criteria for boards that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, definitely. I did speak about it recently for US crowd, and I covered about 6 success criteria, because there's a lot of research materials out there, and there's so much confusion about how they should be communicating to the board, and people are providing hundreds of pages of documents, but it's really unnecessary. So just maybe for the sake of the podcast, I will just share maybe a few key ones. So the thing that I would like to highlight is that there needs to be a business ownership, right? So firstly, the board needs to be aware that they own cyber risk, and that the C-suite executives are jointly responsible for cyber risk management, not just the CISOs. So there needs to be enough time allocated in the board agenda for cyber risk discussions. And then the board needs to also find out if they are rightly equipped, first of all, right, in protecting their most valuable assets. Residual risk that cannot be mitigated within the budget should either be accepted by the board, and if not, then additional resources obviously have to be looked at to reduce them. And there's also the risk transfer options that they need to consider, and the question to ask themselves is, how do we maintain foresight by looking at the future? When we look at like economic drivers or regulation changes. So these are a few key things that they have to consider.
Definitely. Some really, really good, really, really good points there. Very resonates to a lot of discussions that I've had myself with organizations all across Australia and also internationally, actually. Awesome. So I'd like to come back to your second book. So this is actually quite exciting. So the title is, correct me if I'm wrong, so it's a Cyber MayDay and the Day After. So why that title, and what's so important about this message?
Yeah, the common questions that leaders always ask, right, is why do we keep making the same mistakes? Why do we don't never learn from our lessons? Why do mistakes constantly occur? But before any businesses undergo any cyber incidents, or what I would call is their cyber MayDay, have we actually asked the question, right? Like, what is our role in crisis response and disaster recovery? Do we know what we should be communicating in times of crisis? So after more than 1,000, executive leadership coffees that I've had, that's how the book Cyber MayDay and the Day After was birthed. And really, it's meant to provide like a roadmap for organizations on how they can lead through really dramatic emergencies. And we look at all the different wisdom provided by C-levels around the globe for those who have lived through those stories to tell. What leaders should know before an emergency actually happens, how they have created a crisis game plan for future situations? How should we be talking to the media as well? How can we maintain like our image, our branding, and also the trust, right, with our customers? We look at coordination, teamwork, communication, partnership. How do you work with vendors and law enforcement as well to implement your crisis response? So it's a really comprehensive book. Yeah.
Those are some really, really great points. Definitely in line with our discussions today. But I don't want to give out too many spoilers or anything like that for the book. But can you provide some of the lessons learned from this book, from the second book? Sorry.
Yeah, sounds good. It's really important to have a robust BCP plan, and you have to make sure that you're practicing consistently. So in my book, I had Yuval Ilus, who is the Group CISO at Standard Chartered Bank, and he shared that in addition to, the crisis management simulation that he runs with his teams usually, he implemented something called the near-miss exercises. And this is based on like recent incidents that they have observed. And even though they might not be affected, they actually simulate the whole exercise, and it helps them to identify areas of improvement and really help them to be more prepared for the next attack. So it's about taking such initiatives, on top of the usual BCP that you're running frequently, to also make sure that you are relevant to current times and current techniques that are being used, which I thought was really good, and I made sure to highlight that in the book as well.
Awesome. I think you've given us a lot to ponder there, and I'm definitely looking forward to actually reading the book and actually finding out a lot more about this. Maybe we'll do another session to actually to go deep dive into the book. I think like for absolutely. For cybersecurity organizations like us, I think it's also important for us to be there to empower the cybersecurity teams and leaders, to enable them to craft a better story to tell to the boards and business leaders, and in turn, allowing them to actually trust the data and make the right decision. With that, thank you again, Shamane, for your time today and the amazing insights you've given us.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think we kind of discussed it before, right? I think potentially we're definitely gonna get you in for part 2. All right, and thank you our viewers. Awesome. And thank you our viewers and listeners. Just a note, our next episode will be the season finale, so it's very, very exciting. And to close off our season, we have an exciting episode with the Avertro team. So stay tuned. See you all and stay safe out there.